Okay, excited that you all are here today. Today is the next installment of our Life Unleashed series. And in this series, we focus on letting go of societal expectations and designing the life that we want. When we let go of societal expectations, we live with more intention in all areas of our lives. And for me, that's manifested as becoming more minimalist and more anti consumerist. I no longer believe that I need the fancy house, the car, the new purse, or the latest fast fashion as status symbols, right? I become a lot more conscious of the resources that I consume. So I'm excited to talk today with two people who've inspired me in this area to become more anti-consumerist and more climate conscious. So Angela and Regina, who are the founders of Women's Personal Finance, welcome to Life Unleashed. And I will introduce both of you here in a moment.
Thanks for having us.
For sure. So for those of you who are just joining us, introduce yourself. Let us know who you are, where you're from, and one climate conscious action that you've taken recently. And do that, go to the comments section in YouTube and put your comments there, and we'll use that similar to like we would use a Zoom chat throughout this event. So I'll actually start by asking Angela and Regina. So Angela, we'll start with you. Who are you? Where are you from? And you'd only have to say the very little because I'm going to do the full intro of you. So your name, your location, and a climate conscious action you took recently.
Okay, I am Angela. I live in the Pacific Northwest outside of Seattle, and I rode my e-bike into work today after dropping my 9-year-old off at Carpool. He sits on the back and can ride on the bike on busy roads and longer trips.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah. And you have, that's the cargo e-bike.
Yeah.
So that's, we'll talk about this, but it's like a car replacement.
It is, or a car supplement for us.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we got to ride Angel's e-bikes last year when we visited.
And then I suckered you into buying your own.
Oh yeah,
after that.
Sure. Awesome. Regina, so I just said your name. Where are you and what's a climate conscious action you've taken recently?
I am based out on the Oregon coast, a small town out here. And this is a small one from the last week. I inherited yet another abandoned hydro flask, and the lid had some problems with it. And instead of buying a new water bottle, I was able to simply reorder the lid and rescue a $50 water bottle.
Awesome. Cool. So me, I'm Jess. I live in New Hampshire. I also live in this camper van that I'm in right now, and I'm currently on the Northern California coast. And one climate conscious action I have taken is, so we do a lot of hiking, and so we need the replenishing liquid that replenishes your electrolytes. And instead of buying bottles of those things, we get the little packets of the powder of the liquid IV to use. And then we reuse the same plastic water bottles over and over again. So saves money, it saves space, because we wouldn't be able to store all of that in the van anyways. So cool. So I'm seeing a couple of people join. So I see Ariane saying from Durham, North Carolina, who switched to wool dryer balls instead of dryer sheets. And Ken from Aurora, Colorado, confirmed a vacant commercial space has interest in swapping out retail for an aquaponics facility. I don't know what aquaponics is. So Ken, if you could in the chat tell us what you're trying to do here, but that's really cool that you're able to, find space that's, free, low costs, swapping, all of this that you can sort of multi-purpose, use that. So that's cool. And then I see Jess, who's here from Minnesota, and today bought and used reusable bags at the grocery store.
And like you said, bought and used, because those are two different activities when it comes to reusable bags.
Yep. Brought and used them. Yep. So if you're just joining us, tell us who you are, where you're from, and so a climate conscious action you have taken recently. So let me share a little bit more context about why I've included this session in the Life Unleashed content series. So first, like, this series is all about letting go of societal expectations. Like, we don't need to try to keep up with the Joneses. Like, you get to do what you want. And next, we embrace slow-fi, right? And slow-fi is a philosophy that focuses on using financial freedom to build the life that you want. And part of designing the life we want is the impact that we want to have in the world. Right. And for me, I would say my big mission and vision for my life is I want to build a thriving life. I want to help others do the same. And I want to create the conditions in the world where more people have the opportunity to thrive. And being climate conscious, being a good steward of our resources allows that to happen. And so that's why I'm excited to talk about this today. And I see Ken saying aquaponics is indoor hydroponics farming and aquaculture. Very cool. That's super exciting. So today we are talking about climate conscious wealth building. And so I'm going to introduce Angela and Regina and share, and so that we can share more in this conversation about what we can do to reduce our carbon footprint and live a better life in the process. So Angela is a passionate advocate for affordable, sustainable housing in the scenic Pacific Northwest outside of Seattle. She devotes her professional life to this cause while also pursuing financial independence through a philosophy she refers to as slow-fi. So Angela also is pursuing slow-fi, and emphasizes enjoying life and a career that she loves, but currently works 80% time in. And alongside her day job, Angela co-founded and runs Women's Personal Finance. And her historical contributions can be found on her blog, Tread Lightly, Retire Early. And she dedicates time to local volunteer work. And Angela's a nature enthusiast and spends much of her free time gardening, hiking, and embracing the great outdoors, and is an avid e-bike rider and explores the world on two wheels. And then lastly, Angela resides in a cozy starter home that she's lived in for 10 years with her husband and son. Okay, and we have Dr. Regina Moore. Dr. Regina Moore is a consultant, educator, artist, and community building expert. As the co-founder of the award-winning Women's Personal Finance and the founder of That Frugal Pharmacist, Regina's life changed dramatically when her son was diagnosed with cancer, merging her financial independence journey with a deeper explanation of the power of community. Regina achieved her baseline financial independence number in 2021 and mostly retired from pharmacy at that point to focus on what she loves to do, which is to build communities. She's a nonprofit co-founder and now serves as an advisor to the Psychedelic Pharmacy Association. And when she's not involved in either women's personal finance or psychedelic advocacy, you can find her foraging for mushrooms and enjoying everyday chaos on her hobby farm along the Oregon coast. So welcome to both of you. So glad that you're here.
Thank you. It's always weird to hear your bio read back.
Especially when it's like, oh, I do too many things. Oh no.
You do the things that you want to do.
It's just they happen to be a lot of them.
Okay, so for anyone who's just joining us, I would encourage you to go introduce yourself to us in the chat. Let us know who you are, where you're from, and some client conscious action that you've taken recently. And then I'm going to also remind you, I want you to stick around until the end, because at the end, we are going to be settling a big debate that's come up recently. Experts recently came out to share how often people should replace or like buy new bath towels. And we think this has a lot to do with our discussion today. And so we're actually going to answer that question and settle the debate at the end of the call. But without further ado, let's dive in. So I'm really excited for this conversation. So this conversation came out of, I recently read something that the two of you had put out that I thought was really powerful, right? And so you were talking about like ESG funds or like fossil-free mutual funds. And, in my mind, I've always felt like, oh, I really should be like, I should do my research and I should like do all of the things. But what you said was, the impact of those is somewhat ambiguous, right? Because the top holdings, right, of all of VTSAX or like Vanguard's fossil-free mutual fund are the exact same, like the top 10, right? You have Microsoft, Apple, NVIDIA, Amazon, Meta, the Googles, Eli Lilly, Broadcom, right? And all of these companies are benefiting from fossil fuels and fast fashion and, all of these things. And so, yeah, so you said like, so you sort of walked through this, that like one of you does the ESG investing, one of you doesn't. But what you said that I thought was really powerful was, but for both of us, our climate action doesn't center around our investments. Our stable investments allow us to focus our energy elsewhere. And so that's what I want to talk about today, because I don't think ESG investing is necessarily a silver bullet, and that we can make more of an impact by taking action. And so, yeah, so I want to sort of dig in with you and hear what you both have to say about like, what do you think is the relationship or the connection between personal finances and being climate conscious? And does like one help the other?
Angela.
Go ahead. Oh, I just try and usually let Regina talk first so that I don't railroad her.
So for me, I think they can naturally go very hand in hand. I come from the frugality side of the financial independence movement, trying to reduce your spending so that your money goes further and you can reach financial independence sooner. And though sustainability and climate have always been something that have been in my mind, I would say that they've become more of a focus in recent years. And my interests have evolved naturally in realizing that by spending less money to kind of further my somewhat selfish retirement goals, I was actually significantly reducing my ecological footprint compared to many of the people around me. So I think there's ways to approach this kind of thing where you don't need to feel like you're going hardcore and never purchasing things and recycling everything that there is, but like just if you can look at things from a perspective of reducing your spend, you're going to make significant gains in reducing your impact. And that's been a major focus for me. And I enjoy exploring it further year after year and getting a little bit deeper and incrementally improving.
Whereas for me, I started more from the environmental side of things. I really got focused on my money when I was paying off my student loans, but the frugality was really kind of secondary to me. And it was really the environmental impact that was first priority. And kind of like what Regina was saying is that it's really hard to pull apart the two. Like you can do environmentalism and spend a lot of money, and you can do frugality and be super wasteful, but for, you know, maybe 80% of the stuff, it really is the same conversation. You know, you can go out and buy all new bamboo utensils and toss the ones you have in the name of sustainability, or you can buy, or, you know, snatch all of the like single use individually wrapped you know, plastic forks, so you don't have to run your dishwasher in the name of frugality. So there are clearly like on the margins where you can not hit both points, but for both of us, it's really interesting that we both have like a different initial motivation, but a lot of our decisions end up, you know, more in the middle. You know, having a smaller home means that you're spending less money on your mortgage and your insurance and your property taxes and your utilities, but it also means that you have a much lower carbon impact than if you had a larger home. So, you know, different initial reasoning, but same outcome.
That's interesting. Yeah. And I'm trying to think about, as you're answering this, like the motivations for me. Like I feel like, I don't know, like I came at this probably originally from the reducing spending side of saying like, I want to spend my money consciously on the things that I value, and I want to not spend money on the things that I don't value. Right. Which I think has led to this like decisions that also mean that you know, those are climate conscious decisions. But I think the like shift for me has more happened in the last couple of years as I've been focusing more on minimalism. You know, so for me, part of it was like, you know, in the name of frugality, we kept everything, you know, and like it just it's like we could possibly need this thing someday, and so we kept it, and then, you know, got to a point where we were like, okay, we just need to like clean house and like get rid of just like, and I think we got rid of like thousands of things over, you know, a couple of different minimalist challenges that we did over a few years. And then the like living in the van for part of the year and having just the things that we need like has made me really think a lot more about when there's a purchase or when there's something like, do I need that? Or like,
where am I going to put it?
I make do? Yeah. Do I need that? Where am I going to put it? And like, you know, it just makes me think more about like, I don't need that. Why would I need that? Like, that'll just be like cluttering up my life and make me feel tied, you know, down and such. So yeah, so it's interesting. So I feel like in some ways we're coming at this from a few different angles, like the frugality angle, the environmental angle, and then the like the minimalist and I don't know, like the psychological benefits of just having less stuff.
Oh yeah, that's part of it for me too.
Yeah.
And I can totally commiserate on the holding on to things that you might someday need, especially living rurally where like my acquisition costs are higher, either be it because I need to travel 40 minutes to go purchase something in person, or I have to order it and have it shipped. You know, I don't have resources as readily available. So we definitely hoard more than needed. But I'm on a similar path of trying to get much more clear on what I actually need to have around. And this is probably a different conversation, but with me and Angela, we're also starting to get into a lot more conversations within our community at Women's Personal Finance about wider community building and how we can resource share to reduce the things that we individually need to have access to that our wider community might be able to supply.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I think so. We'll get into some of the specifics in a second. First, what I want to do, I actually am going to post this question, and I want you to answer in the comments. So recently, we saw that experts told us how often you should buy new bath towels, and so we want to ask you all how like. What like in your mind, how often do you think like you should buy new bath towels? put that in the chat and we're going to answer that at the end. And yeah, so we'll keep this up. And yeah, maybe you could say like in less than 5 years, more than 5, between 5 to 10 years, 10 to 15 years, right? How often do you think that people should buy and replace their bath towels? So we'll leave this up. I actually want to ask each of you, and Angela, we can start with you on this one, but I'm actually curious, like, what are you guys have used the word eco-frugal, and so like this to like communicate this combination between doing things that are both, one, climate conscious, and two, good for your wallets, right, and good for your wealth building. And so I would love to hear, Angela, what we'll start with you and go to Regina. What are some of the like main strategies that levers that you're pulling on this front? And what does it look like for you on a daily basis?
So this is where I think when you were talking about the minimalism and the like freeing up your brain from stuff, for those who don't know, I am on a continuing clothes buying ban. I haven't bought clothing for over 7 years now. And while that clearly saves me a lot of money and resources, and I do get new to me clothing through Buy Nothing and clothing swaps and hand-me-downs, etc. So we'll start there, but that includes all my clothes and everything. But something that I wouldn't necessarily have thought about initially was the mental freedom and like decluttering of never thinking about buying new clothes. Like it seems like it shouldn't be that much brain space, but going into a Target or going, past a clothing store, like it doesn't even process in my brain that is something that I can buy. And when you're committed to not bringing new things into your home, you can start ignoring a lot of the like digital and like physical like marketing clutter that is telling you to buy more stuff. So for me, it's like the clothing is a very easy, hard line. I'm just not doing it, but it's bled over into other parts of my life that most of the time we just don't need more stuff. And when you're not considering it being a possibility, you also don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. So I have better things to think about than figuring out what other consumer goods I need to bring into my home.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So that's one of them, right? I'd love to hear. So I know you mentioned at the beginning, like you having an e-bike, and in your bio also mentioned living in your starter home. I think those are probably two other strategies. I'd love to hear, besides the clothes buying ban, like what other ways do you feel like have had the most impact in your life?
Yeah, so that's where I kind of started with the stuff, because consumer goods contribute a whole lot more to carbon emissions than we like to think. But the big stuff is, where do you live? How much do you drive? How long is your commute? How much food do you waste? And how much consumer goods do you buy and work through? So, we bought a...
Can I pause you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Where do you live? How much do you drive? Food waste? Was that the fourth one? Food waste and then consumer goods?
Okay. I mean, for most of us, those are going to really be our big four impacts, and specifically things we may have more or less control over. The bottom two, we absolutely do. Where we live and how much we drive. A lot of times people make the decision to have a larger home or a larger space that may be further away from things, but their lives are still very tied to more city driven places. And so you have to buy a newer car more regularly. You drive a whole lot more miles. You have the larger home, and then you have to furnish the larger home. So when we're talking about, our like personal climate impact, we could really like focus down on, I'm going to make sure I'm going zero waste with my shampoo and my toothpaste, and making sure I have a bamboo toothbrush, and researching all that stuff while you're living in a really big home with more space you need, and with a commute that, takes you 40 miles each way to work. Where if you downsize the home or downsize the commute or found a way to, work remotely part-time, like those have much larger impacts than some of the little stuff that seems really like flashy environmental. And like they have a very clear black and white, like if you're chewing toothpaste tabs instead of having a toothpaste tube, like clearly you're reducing plastic. But it's a little bit not as obvious when you're living in the home that has 500 square feet more than you need.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, it makes me think of like, I don't know. So for example, I remember one person at one point, I don't remember if Zach from 4 Pillar Freedom, this is years ago, he wrote an article about how like, with money, it was like he needed to get the big 3 right. Like he needed to get his housing, his transportation, and his food. But like the housing and transportation piece for him, it was like if he could get that right, he could eat Chipotle every single day for lunch if he wanted to, right? And it would still cost him less than like living in a different, more expensive place. And in some ways it reminds me a little bit of this conversation that it's like it sounds like there's certain big things that you can focus on and that are like more important than like, I'm going to carry around my plastic or metal straw instead of ever using a straw somewhere, that it's like, that like a few bigger things are more impactful, that like maybe we don't need to be constantly thinking about every
how much mental
tiny, small
space
thing.
Yeah, how much mental space are you taking up trying to fix this little tiny incremental thing while you're ignoring the big, glaring thing? But it's also a lot easier to pat yourself on the back for bringing your metal straw than it is to consider maybe my home is too big. Maybe my car is too big. Maybe my older car is just fine. Like those start to impact like how we actually live and experience the world versus swapping out, a reusable straw for a disposable one. Like we feel like we can get the gold star for sustainability, but we're not really doing very much.
It's not
people are pitching those purchases. Like there's a whole machine there encouraging you to go spend money on on your metal reusable straws. There's bloggers getting, their click-through sales fees promoting all of these eco-friendly products that you need to bring into your life. So there's also that. Nobody's making money off of encouraging you that you need a 2-bedroom house and not a 4-bedroom house.
Yeah, that makes sense. So Regina, before we get to yours, a couple comments came in. So Ariane shared that she did a resolution in 2023 to not buy clothes and stuck to it. So it was an excellent reset. Has gone back to buying clothes, but buying less. So that's awesome. And then let's see, Ken shared that he often needs to drive quite a bit as a utility locator, but has not had his own vehicle in about 10 years. So that's, if there's a way to reduce the number of vehicles that you have, that could also be an impact too. Regina, I'd love to hear a little bit more. So like, what does this look like for you on a daily basis? What do you feel like are like the things that have the biggest impact?
So choosing where I wanted to live when we kind of settled down, which is also our first home purchase. I wanted to have space. I wanted to live somewhere where my home and my surrounding space were my retreat, so that I didn't feel the need to be out all the time to fulfill myself. And I'm much better than I was 10 years ago, but I am somebody who responds to advertising. Like it gets wheels going, and I might not be buying what somebody's pitching to me, but it starts me thinking about other things. I wanted to remove myself from a lot of the bigger like consumer opportunities. So we moved out to a rural area. There isn't a lot here. My weekends when we lived in the city were often spent going to thrift stores. We really enjoy that. And it felt fine to be out making those purchases because they're used items. I'm not spending a lot. I'm a pharmacist, even though I don't work much as that now, but my income was really good. So it all felt very inconsequential, but we had like loads of crap because I would just buy things. So I made some really conscious decisions about what I wanted my day-to-day life to look like and where I chose to live, and focusing in on my home and my home life. At the time that we moved where we did, I was still working full time, and I had a pretty significant commute. It's about 25 miles each way. But as I've been able to transition out of full-time work, I do still do things remotely, but like we really are home most of the time. Like aside from taking my son back and forth to his homeschool group, which is about 4 miles away, we might leave the house like once a week. So we've really tried to reduce our impact that way. Some interesting things now that our life is transitioning into like what feels like a little bit more of a stable retirement space is we're starting to bring more travel in. But we approach travel a little bit differently than a lot of people, in part because we have the time and space for it. But we like to take big extended trips. So, air travel is something that I like have a little bit of guilt about indulging in. So we try not to do it very much, but we did go to Thailand for 2 months this year. So I feel better about the impact of some of the things that I do when I can take one big trip instead of taking a lot of little trips, for example. When you mentioned the things about living in the van and minimalism, I've also appreciated how some of these bigger trips have impacted how I think about things when I get back home too, because I see how much I actually need to live for 2 months. And, it's not much. It's a backpack and a place to cook. So I bring some of those experiences home with me too, to try to kind of further hone and adapt and just keep pecking away at what we really need to live a good life. And the longer it goes on, the more I find it's not very much. So I don't know. Those are two big ones.
There's a couple of things that you said there that really resonated with me. One was like choosing where your home is. Like not everyone has the ability to do that necessarily while they're still working full time, or if they're working in a location specific job. But like with us, with our move to New Hampshire, we've found ourselves like, we'll go to a few places, but like I can go for really nice walks and hikes like really close to my house. And so like we probably end up, I don't know, driving quite a bit less, because we also don't need to drive like 45 minutes to like get to a place that has like something that we actually want to do, from being in the city. So that's one thing. And then another thing that you started to touch on was this idea of like just needing less. And I feel like that's something I've been really inspired by you from, is like some of the things that you've communicated about, like how everyone, right, how like advertisement and everything just like wants us to consume more. And it's like this really capitalist system that's like, well, if we can get you to consume more, then you have to make more, and then you're stuck in this system. Right. But like one way to like get out of that system, or I don't know, to get yourself out of that cycle, is to just figure out how little you actually need to live a good life.
I've had fun with it. Like, one thing I try to tell people when we're speaking to groups, and it's always really funny because Angela approaches it totally different. Like, she's like, reward yourself. Don't forget to like take time if you're like on a clothes buying day, and plan a treat for yourself at the end or something, right? Along those lines. And I approach it completely different. Whereas I get satisfaction out of like seeing how far I can dial things down, like challenging myself to see inherently like, where is my happiness coming from? And almost never looking at things like I'm depriving myself. Like, I think I live a very like rich life where I'm at. We eat well. Like, I'm been so excited the last month because my friend has a restaurant business that closed down, and like we had to go take all of their bulk legumes. So I had to buy some new airtight containers to house my 10 years worth of beans. But like, we're at home, we're cooking, and like those are things that are exciting to me, which I don't know if that, yeah, I'm weird. But I don't feel deprived at all, and I have the ability to spend time where I want and go do things if I want, and none of that is about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, back before I had my son, back before I had an e-bike, I had a regular bike. When you talk about having like rewards for yourself at the end of something, I had created a chart for myself to commute to work, not by my car 100 times. And then I said I'd buy myself a pair of Lululemon yoga pants, because at that point I was buying clothes like a typical millennial woman. And that was my reward for doing 100 trips. And by the time I got, halfway through, suddenly, like, I think I even forgot that I was going to reward myself with that. It just became more of a habit. And, how do I reduce the wear on my car by traveling other ways? But it was like, to get myself started, I gave myself, well, this will be my prize of something I really want. And then partway through, I was like, I don't really want it anymore. So I think if anything, it's more of a like trick my brain rather than, that delayed gratification that you find out that something that seemed like a shiny new thing ends up not actually being the thing you want when you give it some time to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
There's one deeper element too, which we talk about sometimes when we're doing like Instagram reels and things like that. And I also am very interested in increasing my internal resilience. I hope that our generation doesn't see significant impacts from climate change issues and other collapse umbrella situations. But I think that people who have learned to be happy with less and who can still enjoy more when it's available are going to fare a lot better, especially mental health wise. Like, we saw myriad ways that people didn't respond very well during COVID lockdowns and all of that. And I was happy as a clam, like, not that people were sick, but my life, everything was dialed in. We're adaptable. We don't need to leave the house. But if I can't buy paper towels this week, like,
if you don't buy paper towels in the first place, it doesn't really matter that you can't get to the store to buy them.
There's that. But that's also kind of like a deeper level for things now. Not when I started down this whole path, but I think about that a lot more now, and also trying to pass on those skills and that mindset to my son, because I think he is going to have to deal with more of these things. And I want him, I would rather him be set up to expect less. And sometimes that comes across kind of, can I curse here? Crappy. Like, who wants to tell their kids, like, learn to be happy with less? Right? You want to teach our kids to reach for more, and everybody should do better than their parents. And like, I push back on that a little bit, like that constant growth mentality. I don't know that my son needs to do significantly better than me in life. Like, we have a good life. I want him to maintain, and I want to ensure that he's set up for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to bring us back to our poll about the bath towels. So we had a few answers. Ken shared that anywhere between 3 and 10 years. Jess shared still using a few high quality towels that she got 20 plus years ago. And then from Adrienne, replace bath towels when they're falling apart. So probably 5 to 10 years. So I'm excited to dive into this. As we get to the end. So what I want to do now is I want to do a little bit of an audit of like my own life with you two experts here. Right. And I feel like I have a list, right? I have the where do you live, how much do you drive, food waste, and like consumer goods. And perhaps we can also sort of dig into like what are in those categories, like what are some of the like umbrella or like what are some of the specific strategies that people could use. And so I'll share a little bit about what I'm doing in those categories, but then I want to say like what other things could people consider. So where you live, this is an interesting one because we just sold our 1,000 square foot condo and bought a 2,000 square foot house, right? So like we did buy a bigger house, which is like, I don't know, right? Like that's not moving me in the right direction, but the location potentially is, right? So like being in a place that I actually want to be will like hopefully make me not want to like get out of Dodge as much. Like I found when I lived in Boston, I was just constantly itching to like take a trip or fly somewhere, or I wanted to leave the city. Whereas we're currently traveling in our van right now. Part of that is because we planned this trip long before we decided to move. But we're actually like really excited to go home and explore our local area and really like be at home. Which I feel like is a really interesting thing. I think I've never felt that way. I've always been like, I want to leave and I want to travel and I want to go. Like I always had that itch. So it does sound like finding a place where you're happy being is potentially like a good reducing your carbon footprint kind of decision.
Well, and I think that's also where we're not going to do everything right or even close to perfect. And so, maybe you do have a larger home, but does it, are you more encouraged to cook for yourself and, make sure that you're using the leftovers because you're home and you're not going to the restaurant? Or, are you not taking that extra, plane flight because you're happy at home? And also, we're just not going to be perfect. And, I think there's a lot of purism around the environmental community, but only in like certain ways that they think are the like important ones. I think we've all been exposed to people that have like their thing that they think everyone needs to do while ignoring the other parts of their life. So, maybe you do have a larger home, but if you have a lot of other things that you're doing really well, it's not an all or nothing. The zero waste chef talks about how we don't need a few people doing zero waste perfectly. We need, millions of people doing zero waste imperfectly. And I think this is kind of true for like a broader climate conscious life, that if we're going to feel guilty and unhappy about one part of our life that we think we're going to do better, we're probably going to end up blowing it in other parts because we're not happy.
So I think one thing we didn't touch on it exactly yet, but is like lean into like what you're good at, right? And like what you enjoy. So if you're recognizing that you can find a place where you're happy and you know that you're going to be traveling less or it's going to be offsetting other things, embrace what's easy for you and not try to work at the things that feel, I don't know, hard or bring you less happiness. And likewise, you're running a business. So, were you running, what were you doing in your condo in Boston? Thank you. I knew it. Like, were you working out of there, or for the most part, were you still employed at jobs where you had to go somewhere and you had an office space and things like that?
So for the like last couple of years, we were both working from home, which was very difficult to do. Have two people work from home in a 1,000 square foot place. And one thing, it's interesting as you're talking about this, that it's like there's trade-offs. And so thinking about the very specific trade-offs of like, okay, this decision means this. And I think one of you said at the beginning, like if you get a bigger house, then you have to get all the stuff to fill the house. But like we had everything that we needed for a 2,000 square foot house just crammed into a 1,000 square foot space, because like I needed a desk and Corey needed a desk. So we had like a desk guest room combo, and then we had like a living room dining room my desk combo, you know. And so yeah, so I think there's that piece of it, as well as like when we lived in Boston, we got takeout like pretty often, and now like that's just not an option. Like when you live rurally, like DoorDash is not a thing, Grubhub is not a thing. You can't like walk to your closest restaurant and just like pick up takeout. You know, so like there's definitely some trade-offs, as well as I think Regina, you and I were talking about this, that like living rurally is interesting because nobody comes to pick up your garbage, right? Like in Boston, you would just put stuff in the garbage can and people would come, and the garbage people would come on a weekly basis and take it away, and you didn't really have to think about it. But rural living, like you have to take all of your trash yourself to the disposal site. And so, you know, on a weekly basis, every other week, whatever, like we are confronted with like, this is how much waste that we've created. And it's definitely got us thinking about like, okay, how can we, you know, reduce this? Because one, then we have to go less often. And two, like, that's just better. Anyway, so yeah, it's interesting. Those are some of the things. I put another question up here that I want to hear from folks. So if you're hearing us as we're talking through these categories, like I would love to hear what this looks like for you in these different categories. So in terms of like for the housing piece, what are things that you are already doing, or would like to do that could help you in this area? So the housing piece. Then I guess the second piece is, how much do you drive? So we drive a lot in the van, at least. So like when we're traveling, we're driving quite a bit. When we're at home, we rarely drive, right? When we're at home, we're you know, leaving our house or our town like once a week, twice a week, like getting groceries and going for hikes, you know. But when we're driving, but one thing that we've tried to do this year is like when we traveled last year, we were like changing locations every like 3 days. Whereas one thing that you said, Regina, was like the slower traveling. So like going to a place and enjoying it for longer. And so that's something that we've been trying to do, is to say, okay, we're going to go to a place and we're going to be there for like a week. Which for us, that's slower. You know, I think we could probably extend that out and stay places for even longer than that. But that also reduces the cost of gas too, you know, and, you know, allows us to have a lot more sort of chill experience versus, you know, feeling like we're constantly running around, seeing the big sites, driving 3 more hours to get to the next place.
I do want to say, though, that especially when we're talking about how much do you drive, like this is also very much a systemic issue. You know, we're talking a lot today about what we can do individually, but especially like how much do you drive is there affordable housing near the like other things in your life, your job, your childcare, your services, etc. And B, is there enough density that if you live in a more suburban area or an outer urban area, can you, like, is there a good bike lane? Are there good sidewalks? Is there reasonable mass transit? You know, especially because a lot of these things, it's much easier to do if you have a more flexible schedule, if you have the money to buy the more expensive place closer in. So a lot of these can tend to be harder on folks that have lower incomes too. So while we're talking about our individual choices and our individual impact here, like this is also where like systemically and as a community, we need to come out and support the changes that we want to see so that it's more possible for more people. So, you know, choosing to have a smaller house closer in, but nobody else can buy a home closer in. If you're blocking new apartment complexes in your neighborhood, you know, if you show up at a neighborhood community meeting and you help block a new 6-story apartment building from going into your neighborhood, I don't really care how many times you eat at home instead of getting takeout. If you have blocked, you know, 50 families from living in your neighborhood and leaving them on the road every day, you have made a bigger negative impact by that than, you know, all the non-plastic straws that you use.
And for me, the transportation piece, it's not just like how much you drive, it's how much do you intentionally, or I guess, how much do you unintentionally drive? How, when you're talking about planning your day, planning where you live versus where you work and things like that, like, I don't want to drive as much. And here's where the eco-frugal piece comes in. I think about how much it costs us to drive into town when my husband says, I forgot this thing I need for a project. I need to go buy it. And I go, well, you know, that's going to be like $25 in gas or whatever it is. Like, do you need it today or can that wait until Friday when you have a doctor's appointment? And I finally got him trained to do better. Like, cause we're flexible at this point. So for him, at least, like the time piece isn't as important. He doesn't necessarily mind making the trip. Whereas I'm like, I'm not making, you know, a 2-hour round trip. If I don't have to, I want to be at home doing other things. But if I introduce the money piece to it, which inherently also reduces our gas usage and things like that. So being thoughtful about that, or being thoughtful about, you know, you have extracurricular activities you or your children do. Are you driving there and then driving home and then driving to the grocery store again? Or are you thinking about how you can, like,
batching, like, can I batch the things that I'm doing so that I can.
So intentionality, I think, is kind of what that boils down to. Like, think about it. Or can you be more efficient in how you act? You know, what you're doing with taking trips is a little bit different because you're intentionally on the road, right? Like, of course, you could choose not to do that and not be using the gas, but you're on a trip. You're also not using hotels and things. You're in your own area. And another element that we talk about sometimes is like how we park a lot of the things that we're less comfortable with elsewhere with a lot of the services that we take part in. So eating out at restaurants, like if you've ever seen the back end of a restaurant and other places, the amount of waste that potentially is going on there. If you're eating out 5 days a week, but you're making sure to be perfect about the amount of plastic in the items that you purchase, it's a little different than somebody who's so and mostly eats at home. Like, you have to be aware of the impact that the services you take part in have to. We shield ourselves.
Right. That makes sense. No, and I think that makes us a lot of sense, right? We're traveling right now and we're driving a lot, but also we're cooking and consuming most of our meals in the van because we're not in towns, we're not in places that have restaurants, and we're, you know, being pretty stingy with our like water and power usage, and like our, you know, we're parked somewhere for like 5 days right now and not driving anywhere, and everything's running off that the solar is like replenishing our batteries right now, right? So I'm hearing that, like, thinking about it and being intentional is, I don't know, like, more important than being perfect in all of the different areas. And that, like, that, like, traveling and drive, you know, like, there's certain things that we can do to reduce it, but we're, you know, we're being thoughtful, and we don't have room for wasting food, and we don't have room for buying things, right? Consumer goods, because we don't have room for them. And so, so like thinking about the sort of full larger picture. Yeah, I'm seeing a couple comments. So one person saying that they deliberately purchased a smaller home to reduce their footprint, and then got and made sure it was closer to their workplaces. And then I'm actually curious about, so Ken asked a question and said, when consuming experiences, do you weigh the environmental impact between local entertainment and a touring company, e.g. Taylor Swift versus local jazz in the park?
I think this also really hits on what Regina was just talking about with takeout versus like the amount of plastic you're using to cook for yourself. You know, a lot of that stuff doesn't look maybe super different on the front end, but the local jazz group playing in your local park has a much lower environmental impact than a large, you know, national tour, where then you're also encouraged to buy a new outfit, and maybe you're going to another city over and doing the big and the more. And you know, there's a lot of great local music. Like if that's your thing, okay. But if, and I think that's the big thing too, is like, if you really, really love music and you really, really love some performer, then maybe you are intentionally choosing to go do that. But are you going to the big event because of FOMO and everybody else is going and it's going to be great? And maybe you would be just as happy finding the like local, you know, Sunday community band that costs a lot of money, has a much lower environmental impact. And, you know, knowing yourself as to like what's important to you. And that's the thing, is that I think a lot of times we think everything is important and everything is great and everything is worth the treat, but not everything can be that kind of priority. So it's, you know, whenever we talk about specific things we've opted out of, we get a lot of pushback from people who say, oh, well, I could never do that. And it's like, great, then don't, go find something else. But you know, what we're asking folks to do is to be more intentional about what they're choosing, and then picking those important things and ignoring the stuff that they care about just a little bit, or they think they should care about.
Yeah, well, and this,
Angela, to specifically answer the question, yes, are you thinking environmental impact?
I mean, I did not go see Taylor Swift. It was more the cost up front. What?
You wish you had.
I thought about it, but, you know, I chose not to. You know, part of it is I couldn't stomach the cost of the ticket for like a really terrible seat. But, you know, it's one part of the puzzle. Kind of like we have one child. Is the environment the reason why we stopped at 1? It was the reason why 2 was my max limit starting out of the gates, because I didn't want to do more than replace us. But kind of like choosing to not go to a concert, it's like usually there's like 7 different reasons why I'm not doing something, versus is it just the environmental impact? Usually not. You know, riding my cargo bike, you know, is the environmental impact a big part of it? Sure. But so is reducing costs on, you know, the fewer miles I drive on my car, the longer it's going to last. Getting outside more and like moving my body, especially on a day I'm in the office the whole time, I still get, you know, an hour round trip of exercise. And, you know, it brings me joy. So is the first part of that maybe the environment? Yeah, but a lot of the things I'm doing, if it only hits one button, it's probably not worth doing.
I can be slightly more succinct there. No, it does not. The environment does not factor into what I choose to participate in up front as like a, you know, part of my qualifications. This is where the eco-frugal part comes in, where I try to tell people, if you think about one, you're often fulfilling the other. I'm not, well, one, I don't like Taylor Swift, so this particular question will just like sub Bauhaus if they were on tour again or something. I am going to be very hard pressed to want to spend that much money on a singular experience that is so large, and kind of like Angela said, you have bad seats and things like that. And then not to mention for me, like all of the logistics that go into planning these big experiences that you expect or want to be like super fulfilling. And at my age, I have figured out that most of the time these really high stakes experiences are total letdowns because something doesn't happen the way I want to. So I've dialed back or dialed down most of the things that I choose to participate in to make them just lower stakes, more comfortable for me as an introvert, that kind of stuff. But if I don't have a favorite band, but if I had one and they were playing and they were doing one show and it was a once in a lifetime experience, I might choose to go do that. But I'm very clear on picking very few of those activities. So if you hone in on your why, live intentionally, and like embrace your weirdness and not feel the need to keep up with everybody else, you're gonna like tick a lot of the boxes that push things forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because it like reminds me very similar of like intentional spending. It's like intentionality in all of these areas. Like you're going to intentionally choose to do the things that you want to, and then you'll make trade-offs to like make it feasible or possible or, you know, whatever. Yeah. And, you know, there's one thing like I'm thinking about this, like we used to go to concerts because people would invite us to them, and like friends would be like, hey, let's all go to this concert. And we'd be like, oh, okay, sure. And then we realized like we don't really like concerts. There's probably like one band that we absolutely love, and we've been to see them in concerts multiple times, and we will go individually, our choice. But now it's just like a hard rule. Like we just are going to say no to concerts unless it's like something that we would choose to go to ourselves. Just because I just don't want to do it. It's not about the environment for me, but like that decision impacts that, I guess.
But being more intentional about like opting out of things that just feel like things you get stuck with, or that's what you need to do because that's the accepted social thing, or unfortunately that in the modern age and as adults, most of our social functions involve showing up places where you have to spend money. And like on principle, I'm pushing back on that more. Like you're welcome to come to my house and have coffee. I'm not opposed to meeting you out for coffee, but why do we need to meet out? Like we have houses, like come hang out.
Yeah. Or like, can we go for a walk?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So I want to get to this final question, which is how often do you think that people should buy new bath towels? So Regina, what are the experts, what did they say?
We went down a rabbit hole about this.
So the experts said that you should be replacing your bath towels every 2 to 5 years. And they gave various reasons why you should replace your towels, like they were starting to feel scratchy, or they were starting to have smells. And I wondered if those people maybe needed to replace their washer and dryer versus their bath towels. But like there's, or they've simply gone out of fashion, the color has faded. And then my favorite was also, or they're 5 years old. Just like that was it. Like it's just, or they're old. Like not even anything like semi kind of wrong with them or not, but just age alone.
Yeah.
And I mean, should I jump into answering the question?
I'll jump in, and then Angela, and then you. So you guys, so you asked me this question. You were like, how often? And in my mind, I was like, I don't think I've ever actually bought bath towels for myself. Like we still have some of the bath towels that we had in college that like our parents bought for us. And when my grandfather died, like I inherited some of his like nice plush bath towels. And like when my mom cares, so like my mom was like, I redid the bathroom and I want my towels to match. And so she gave me her old towels from that. And so I don't think I've ever actually bought myself a bath towel. I've certainly gotten rid of some after like Corey's college bath towels are still usable. Mine were not. And so we got rid of those. But yeah, I don't think I don't think there's a rule or a number of years that someone should do that. It's more like, are they usable? And if they're not, then get new ones.
Yeah.
Angela, what do you think?
Well, I also have never bought bath towels.
This is the secret to FI, by the way, is
That's
never
the
buying bath
towels.
towels.
Bath to FI. The
Yes.
towels. Yeah, we got them handed down to us before we bought our home, which was 13 years ago. So they were not brand new then. I don't know how old they are now, but probably 15 to 20 years, and they work just fine and they don't smell. But we also cloth diapered our son, and so I actually went into the Facebook groups and learned how to properly clean your clothes, because a lot of people don't actually use their washers right. Kind of weird, but if you have a good wash routine too, things tend to actually get cleaner. And so I think it's strange when people talk about basically things getting musty or something from not getting clean in their washer. Maybe you need to actually do your washer maintenance. Maybe you need a new wash routine. Maybe your washer is 40 years old and it needs to be replaced. There are a lot more things than, oh, well, my bath towels are a little smelly, so clearly they're the problem. But also when we dove into this, it was also, we realized, we looked into it, and when you get the brand new fluffy towels, apparently they actually treat towels with a chemical to make them feel fluffier and softer, and they're actually less absorbent and have extra chemicals. So that nice fluffy new towel feel is kind of like a new paint smell, where it's actually terrible, off-gassing.
It's not actually good
chemicals.
For you.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Regina, how about you? How often do you think people should replace their towels?
I have also never purchased a new bath towel. I like everyone else, most of our bath towels are hand-me-downs from other people who had used towels and were replacing them and offered them up to us. Oh no, everybody froze. Am I still here?
Yep, you're still there.
Okay. Yeah, you're still there.
So most of them are that. I do have 2 or 3 towels that I bought at thrift stores because I liked the patterns. And I will admit, not bath towels, but I did purchase 2 beach towels at Costco in 2011 for a trip that we were going on, and we were planning to be at the beach. And I've never taken them on a trip again because they were big and heavy. So it was a mistake. And now I have 2 family bath towels. I mean, beach towels.
So I think our sample size of 3 has spoken, but really this is your path to FI.
So how are these bath towel companies staying in business? Because clearly no one buys new.
Well, we're different than the average person, clearly, if people generally replace their towels every 2 to 5 years.
Yeah. I do want to say quick on this, though, is this is where, again, we're talking really individual stuff, and people like to say, well, my environmental choices don't matter because it's the big corporations that are doing all the awful things, and they are all the impact. But if everybody had bath towels that were 10 to 15 years old, they wouldn't be producing more bath towels or t-shirts or Stanley cups or, fill in the blank. Yes, corporations are a huge, massive impact. The fossil fuel companies are huge, problematic situations. However, consumer goods have to be purchased or they aren't made. So the 3 of us, our sample size of 3, clearly we're not enough to impact the bath towel industry. But if everyone started keeping their bath towels 3 years longer, there would be fewer of them made on a large scale.
The individual loan impact really doesn't add up on its own. But collectively, we can do a ton. And if all of us do a little bit, we can move the mark, right? That's just the consistent thing. You don't need to be perfect. Just try. Be more intentional.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I want to wrap us up here, but I want to say thank you so much, Angela and Regina, for joining me today. For those of you who want to follow up with them, go check out the work that they're doing at Women's Personal Finance. They have a Facebook group. They also have their insiders community, which I'm a part of. And they have their off Facebook community called Woven. And so if you are a woman who is interested in personal finance, this is the best place.
Woman or non-binary.
Women or non-binary. Thank you. To go and connect with other people and learn more about money, and you talk a lot about climate issues in there as well. So I would encourage people to do that. And then I'll close this out like I close out every single one of this. It's just to say thank you so much for joining us today, and enjoy your journey. Okay, I'm going to end the stream, but you guys can stay.